The Conservative Party has been watching over recent weeks as some senior Labour politicians have been quizzed and sometimes struggle to answer questions about non-trans and trans people. Trans people, those who identify as a gender different from that assigned at birth. Questions such as, what is a woman? Can a woman have a man's bits? That kind of thing have been thrown at Labour, with many members taking the view that a trans man is a man and a trans woman is a woman, full stop, whatever body parts they may have. Well, the Tories now have their own problems regarding trans, having promised a ban on conversion therapy for anyone LGBT, a ban on carting off a teenager to a dodgy therapist who tries to stop them being themselves. Given that some think the ban is more complicated where trans people and children are concerned, the party has effectively U-turned on that pledge as far as trans people go. The ban on conversion therapy won't apply to trans. Now, it's provoked an angry backlash from many LGBT groups. For example, the government's own LGBT business champion has resigned over that U-turn today. And the government also was hoping to organise a huge international LGBT conference later this year. It was a manifesto commitment, but the UK participants are now boycotting it. So what is the Conservative Party thinking on trans right now? About 12 days ago, we heard from Andrew Boff, a patron of the Conservative LGBT plus group and a keen supporter of the trans cause. But does he speak for the party? Today I spoke to an influential backbench MP and the former First Secretary, former Cabinet Minister Damian Green. First I asked him, where is he on conversion therapy?
Conversion therapy can mean a number of things to different people. And when you're writing legislation, you've got to be precise. And so if you say that any questioning of a gender identity expressed by a teenager particularly, I think there's a huge difference in how you should treat children and adults in this. If you say that a medical practitioner saying, are you sure? If you outlaw that, then actually you're outlawing potential therapies that could be useful. So having a long, cool look at this legislation is extremely sensible. My worry is why I make the distinction between teenagers and adults, if you like, is that I don't want anyone to do anything irreversible to a child, essentially.
Medication for a trans teenager.
So medication, absolutely. The puberty blockers and those sorts of drugs, which at best cause permanent alteration and can cause permanent damage. I think doing that to children is abusive.
Does it matter to the Conservative Party at this point, or to you as an MP, that a lot of years really of hard work of trying to kind of clean up the party's image with some of the LGBT groups seems to have been lost in the last few days? We've had the LGBT business champion Ian Anderson stepping down today over this issue.
Yes, it does matter. And I think if we have this debate in a sensible tone, then that shouldn't happen. There are clearly various political pressures at work here. The biggest one that this debate has introduced is the fact that quite a lot of politicians, particularly as it happens, Labour politicians, can't answer the question, what is a woman, which is clearly absurd. But nevertheless, if you think, as I do, that a woman is an adult human female, that does not mean that in any way you're transphobic, as indeed we've seen in recent days. The first trans MP is a Conservative MP, and he's therefore a colleague and friend of mine, and I would like him to continue to feel comfortable.
But in a way, what you've just said is that a trans woman isn't a woman. And that isn't the position, is it? You're not really saying a trans woman isn't a woman, or are you saying that?
Well, I'm saying there's biologically a trans woman is not the same as a woman. I think a woman is an adult human female, but I think a trans woman needs the appropriate respect, should be allowed and encouraged to get on with her life in as good a way as possible. And I think this does give rise, obviously, to the points where, if you like, the rights of trans people can be seen to conflict with women's rights. I think in the end, biology has to be recognised as real, and that the two sides need to engage.
But I think there would be people in your party who say that going as far as you do in saying a trans woman is not biologically a woman and biology is real, and therefore a trans woman isn't a woman, they're a trans woman, that's a different category to someone assigned female at birth. By going that far, you are really putting a very, very large wedge between you and the trans community, that there isn't going to be any reconciliation there. You can say, let's make it a nice debate and let's be polite, but you are really failing to recognise the gender identity at all then, aren't you?
I recognise the gender identity, but I'm saying that's different from biology, and I'm fascinated by your question. You've said that I've asserted that biology is real, as though that's something controversial. I think once we start saying that scientific facts are not real, then we really are in a difficult phase, which I don't think, as it happens, helps trans women or trans men either, and particularly things like women's refuges, where I've spoken to people who run women's refuges, and they say that some of the women who've had terrible experiences do not want biological males around the place. I think that attitude needs to be respected as well.
Let me ask you about where the Tory party is. You're probably fairly mainstream, I'm guessing, in the Conservative Party. If it is observed that the Labour leadership is getting into tangles over answering questions about what is a woman, do you think that should be an issue that your party push at the next election, that you should play this card?
I think we should have a clear position ourselves. Obviously, I would hope the party would, broadly speaking, agree with what I've just said, and indeed the words I'm using are very close to the words the Prime Minister has used on the floor of the House of Commons. And frankly, if Labour politicians can't answer basic questions, then we don't need to push it at all. And journalists will ask them questions, and if they can't answer them, then the general public will draw their own conclusions. I think that would be the sensible approach, because, as I say, overall, I want to try and lower the tone, not lower the tone, lower the temperature
of the
this issue. I think it's difficult to lower the tone in some cases, but actually to lower the temperature so that people don't feel that this is too delicate an area. It's clearly an important area, so it needs to be discussed by politicians, but the way they discuss it is very, very important.
Conservative MP Damian Green there on the view of the trans issue in the party.